Morning. On today's episode, we are going to take a look at a request for help. A gentleman posted about some issues he's having with aluminum welding, and I think I have some solutions. So he's kind of unhappy with how his weld beads are looking. There's a lot of reasons for that, I think, so we're going to get into that. First thing is, got some 1/8 inch thick aluminum here, same as what he claims that he was welding on. So we're going to start out by cleaning this. The cleaner you get it, the better your welds are ultimately going to be. Look like he could have done a better job on cleaning, prepping, especially on, if you look here, this edge here. When you just clean the surface and not this edge, all of this crap, if you look at that, is all going to wind up in the weld pool. So the better you can clean that edge, the better your weld is going to turn out. Now the surface there, not bad, not bad. We're going to acetone wipe that when I'm done as well. Same thing here. Realistically, pulling it in one line is probably better, because if you rub it back and forth, which I have a tendency to do, you can embed more material. But this stuff is pretty clean. I'm honestly not too worried about it. So again, you can see the massive difference here versus the clean, edges clean. Grab some acetone and wipe that down. If you look here, all this material, that's all would have wound up in your weld, would have made it look like it had black pepper floating in there. You always want to acetone wipe when you're done. Got a piece of aluminum wire here. This is 4043. I'm going to wipe this down too. It's not a bad idea to Brillo pad the wire as well, but this is pretty clean right out of the pack I was using earlier, so we're good there. All right, so now that we have a better prep on our material and our filler rod is prepped, I'm going to set this joint up and we'll go from there. So I have the material prepped up in an outside corner joint. Everything's looking pretty good. I tacked up the corners to hold it together. Let me clear the table out of here. There we go. TIG torch wise, it's going to be a little hard to see. I'm running a, let me put my hand there, pretty blunt taper, and then I filed the end of the tungsten a little bit flat. I normally run a mini bowl on my tungstens when I'm welding aluminum, unless it's like thinner than 1/8 inch. So 1/16 inch thick aluminum, I'll run a fine point per se, but on stuff like 1/8 inch and thicker, I'll run a mini bowl. That's my preference. So my machine's set up 135 amps, like he claimed that he was running, and I'm running 70% DC EN, so AC balance is 70%, and I'm running at 60 hertz. So I will run a weld on this, and then we're going to take a look at it when we're done. And I'll try and get it to where you can kind of see what's going on. All right, normally I would have just sped all this up instead of playing in real time, but I thought there's some important things to note here. One, if you watch my TIG torch, for the most part, it's pretty smooth going forward. And since this is shot in real time, you can see I'm not really moving that far forward each step. And not only that, I'm not moving fast. I know that in original picture that I posted that the guy wanted a solution without adding more heat. Maybe he only has a 135 amp TIG welder. Well, one of the things you can do is go even slower than what I'm doing. And if you saw, there wasn't any penetration in the weld. Had I slowed down and let that weld pool sink a little bit, the penetration would have been better despite not having more amperage. Or you could preheat the material. All right, I completed that weld. Let's take a look at it. So the first thing you're going to notice overall, the height and the width of it very consistent. Your cathodic etch zone, the little white area along the weld, pretty consistent. I'm running a number 8 cup at, I believe, about 18, 19 cubic feet an hour. Overall, pretty consistent. Let's take a look at the penetration. Now, I was running this at 135 amps. It's barely through. I wasn't full pedal, but I was close. Ideally, I would weld this. I'd probably set the machine for about 170, 165 amps and then use a little bit more heat. I couldn't press the pedal down far enough because my boot actually was on my table here. But I had to have been very close to 135 amps. So one of the issues that he might be having, if his machine's meter's off by a little bit, he's probably, just by the look of the weld, it looked a little bit on the cold side. And even this looks a little bit cold, a little humped up, and we don't have the penetration on the inside. So I would say a little bit more amperage and also a consistent arc gap. He's probably running a little bit inconsistent arc gap. The travel speed clearly was inconsistent. So just its consistency, 100%. If you can keep that tungsten the same distance the whole time, the same travel speed, it's hard not to have a pretty looking weld. You know, your dabs are consistently added. That's really what it comes down to. Like I said, I'm running at 70% AC balance and 60 hertz. I find on an outside corner like this, 120 hertz actually welds a lot better than 60 in my opinion. So that's something to experiment with as well. But overall, I think it's just a lack of experience as to why the welds look the way they do, and that a little bit more practice will go a long way. And I actually shot a video where I welded just a flat plate, full length welds, bead on bead on bead. If you can do this, you can do this, okay? Doing a lot of outside corner joints, of course, you're gonna get better at it, but this is a lot cheaper and honestly a lot more effective at learning how to control the aluminum puddle than it is just doing outside corner welds or lap welds. Another thing that I'll mention here before we're done, when I'm welding this, at the start over here, I'm using a lot more amperage to get everything started and melted. And then from about, I don't know, a quarter in, all the way till about a quarter to the end, I'm running, say, a consistent amperage, 130 amps. When I get to the last quarter of this plate, or say the last inch, this piece is so heat soaked and there's nowhere for the heat to go in this area. So all of a sudden, it's gonna start welding like I'm running a lot more amperage. So at about the last inch, I'm already tapering off the gas pedal because this is melting like I'm running at higher amperage. And if you can see, like this end, I pushed a little bit more filler. There's not much of a crater, a little bit, but you can tell just by the profile how wide this is getting that it started to melt through, and we'll probably see, we see some evidence of it right here, and that was not from the tack, but it started melting through a little bit more there. And that's because it started heating up. So to get really clean welds on stuff like this, you really need to be higher amperage at the start, a little bit less, and then a lot less at the end. And again, it's all consistency. So hopefully that helps you. If you have any other questions, comments, leave them down in the box for me. Thanks.